has been there ever since. No, he was not evacuated. He went out. Yeah.
Now they're in an undamaged part of the building in this command center.
The National Military Command Center is very smoky right now, but it is not damaged.
Admiral, are there any defensive measures that the Pentagon has taken over the years, anti-aircraft or anything, to divert something like an incoming aircraft?
Not that I'm aware of.
Admiral, what sorts of Pentagon operations were in that part of the building that was hit?
I've been asked that several times, and I'm not familiar with that part of the building. I don't know.
What can you tell us about ships deploying out of Norfolk, aircraft carriers, and guided missile ships deploying out of Norfolk, presumably to provide defense along the east coast of the United States?
I have heard that, Chris, as well, but I do not have that information. I don't know. Go ahead. Oh, I don't know as if it was detected just prior to impact. You're talking seconds. I mean, airplanes fly in this airspace near National or Dulles or other airports all the time. So I don't think there was any warning, so to speak, of this aircraft's action. What did you ask just a second ago? You said,
where's the president?
I don't know.
You know if the plane was from Dulles or National?
No, I don't know any information at all on the plane.
There were reports early on of a second airplane headed toward the Pentagon, and fighters were scrambled. We saw F-16s in the air in this area. What can you tell us about that? Was that a false alarm? And
well, I don't know as if there was ever a second plane. I heard that rumor as well. I don't know if there's any truth to it at all. We did have F-16s up this morning. I'm not clear what their tasking was, but I saw them in the air above the Pentagon.
Were there any accounting for the people who might be missing it?
Sorry, say that again?
Accounting for the people who work in the building who might be missing it?
Well, again, we're asking the people that can hear your broadcasts, read your broadcasts, to phone their families and loved ones immediately to let them know they're okay. And if they are among the injured or the casualties from this, then we will work our way through to identifying them and getting their names out to their loved ones. We will find a way.
Where are the injured going? Where are the injured being taken to?
A variety of area hospitals.
How big was the penetration of the plane itself, Admiral? How many rings at the building?
I don't know.
How wide would you say that gash is? 100 feet, the one we're looking at?
I haven't been over there to see it up close. I don't know. I think that's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try to be back out and give you some more information as we can.
Marine Corps only, if you wanted to do that.
That's Rear Admiral
Admiral, how many people work?
Craig Quigley, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, in our first official briefing here this morning, the first we've been able to bring to you live. One thing that you did not hear Admiral Quigley tell us, which we've gotten from other people in the Navy right now, is this important information for all Navy and Marine personnel. It's this number we're going to give you. It's 877-663-6772. Let me give it to it again. It's 877-663-6772. It is a muster line for all Navy and Marine personnel. They want all Navy and Marine personnel, if they have not been contacted or not contacted, the people they're supposed to please call in to find out where you will be deployed, where you will be used. Again, very important number for Navy personnel. Again, not a lot of information, again, on the number of people injured or dead here, but we have heard from a number of Pentagon people there are dead inside this building. The fire continues to burn. Where we did see flames, we no longer see flames, but there's still black smoke coming toward the courtyard area here. Also said that Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld helped out with the injured for 15 minutes immediately after the plane came into the building, and then is now currently in the National Military Command Center, which is, they say, smoky but operable now. No fire in that part of the building. Mike and Andre, have you ever heard a time when we've had to put out an alert for all Navy and Marine personnel to call in?
No, but we've never heard of anything like this either.
Only in the movies, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Clancy is out of business.
Yes.
Yeah.
His book is now obsolete, the one where something like this happened as well. Again, we want to give you that number that Admiral Frank Quigley mentioned and that Dave Statter was telling us about for all Navy and Marine personnel to muster. It is 877-663-6772. We're joined by our colleague, Frank Herzog, and Frank was down by the Washington Monument when you were updating us there, and we just want to know, we've got 100 D.C. police out there at traffic intersections to help with traffic. The military D.C. National Guard can help. What's the traffic situation downtown?
The traffic situation is there is none. The only traffic moving right now are police vehicles. They've cordoned off the area of downtown around the mall. They've got it under strict control. In fact, you could jaywalk with ease because there just wasn't any traffic downtown. Everybody got out.
And you came back
I came
here
back
via
on the Metro. And I'd heard you say that the Metro was closed at Union Station. It wasn't operating there. So I walked up to Metro Center and got on the Metro there. Now, I've had a couple of people express to me some concern about riding the Metro in the wake of this. I can tell you that my experience at Metro Center was there was a lot of security there.
Yes.
I felt very comfortable, and the trains were operating on schedule.
Metro spokeswoman Cheryl Johnson said they were on heightened alert. They had security, but that their trains were operating. The only ones that weren't operating were at National Airport and Pentagon. They're just running straight through. They're not stopping there.
The scene downtown was just surreal in the fact that you have the emergency personnel responding to these crises. And you have security personnel out anticipating another attack, which it seemed at one point, could be very realistic. And on the other hand, you have tourists walking around, wanting to get into the Washington Monument, wanting to go to the Lincoln Memorial, standing in line at the White House, and not understanding what's going on. And then they're told about the World Trade Center, and they go, oh, and then you see the look on their face where they don't know what to do. We came to Washington to tour. We came downtown to look around today. Now what do I do? And how do I get out? The most surreal thing to me, too, is I was standing there holding a portable television set, watching the World Trade Center crumble. I know. It was unbelievable.
I know, and just look at this with the Pentagon, this big gash in the Pentagon. We want to take another look at the Springfield Mixing Bowl. If you want to know where the traffic is, Frank said you could jaywalk in downtown D.C. and it wouldn't happen. Here is where probably a lot of the traffic is, people heading home. I know that we haven't heard it officially, but it appears that some HOV restrictions are lifted. We know that people heading to Maryland or Virginia via the GW Parkway, especially Maryland, it's one way going north to help get traffic out of the area. Buses may be a little congested in some of the suburban areas because of the crush of people having moved from the city out, but they are still running.
Let me just tell you, many key routes into the district are now closed. From Virginia, inbound routes 50, 66, 29, and the George Washington Parkway closed inbound. An Associated Press reporter was told only medical personnel are being allowed on those roads. Outbound traffic, okay, still open. Anyone who absolutely needs to get into the district is advised to use Metro Rail.
And this again from traffic. D.C. officials say the Memorial Bridge has been reopened, and officials in both Virginia and the district say congestion is clearing up because they are taking steps to make the exit out of D.C. easier. Traffic signals in the city have been reprogrammed to the PM peak commute cycle.
And this is the American Legion Bridge on the right of your screen. Everything's okay out there to the west.
There were some moments today. We talked to a White House staffer who was on his way home, who said he was meeting in the White House with a foreign trade delegation this morning, and that the television monitor was on, but the sound was not on. This explosion happened at the Pentagon. The smoke was streaming into the air. They looked up onto the monitor, and there was a picture. But the camera angle made it look as if the smoke was barreling out of the back of the White House. Wow. And he said the trade delegation got very nervous. And then about 2 minutes later, officials walked in and said, gentlemen, we're evacuating the White House, and all but a dozen essential personnel were evacuated from the White House.
There's this stubborn fire at the Pentagon. They just can't keep it down. Those flames, this is live, erupting and water being poured onto it.
You know what's sickening?
What?
Just to think there's a jetliner buried in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave Staddard is there at the Pentagon. David? David, can you hear us?
Again, I'm sure Dave is trying to get the best vantage point of this. This is our camera looking in a window. I guess it looks like a 4th or 5th floor window where flames just started up again. Dave said earlier they thought they had gotten the fire under control, but there are still hot spots because, as Mike just said, there's a plane somewhere inside of there, no matter how crumbled it may be and possibly full of jet fuel that just won't be put down.
You made an interesting point earlier, Andrea. We got four jetliners were hijacked. I think all of them were bound for California.
Probably
so
loaded with fuel.
Loaded with jet fuel.
To exact the most damage.
And as Andrea pointed out, there are American planes and there are United planes.
The disturbing thing as a traveler, Mike, is traveling as much by air as I do, especially out of Dulles. Yes. Security is very tight at Dulles.
To begin with.
I mean, to the point that I sometimes feel like I'm being hassled. And to think that these people were able to get aboard these planes with some kind of weapon to be able to hijack it. And we're going to have to wait to find out what it was.
But if
that's
you think,
disturbing in itself.
You think airport security is tight now.
Right.
Wait till you see it.
Because again, you wonder how do you protect yourself against something with all the security that we have. Let's go back. We have Dave Statter on the line now.
You saw the flames erupting again, and that's the problem the firefighters have been having here. Every time that black smoke turns to white smoke, all of a sudden we see some more black smoke erupt and occasionally some flames. Most of the fire now seems to be on the opposite side from us toward the courtyard, but you just saw one of those windows, fire shooting out of it, and it seems to be, again, that the fire is traveling in the bowels of the building. And any time there's been a fire, a major fire in the Pentagon, and they've had them before, it's been a very difficult fire to fight. And here, of course, when you have a jet plane that crashes into the Pentagon, it makes it even worse. We talked to people who were up close, who were even a little bit closer than we were when we first arrived, and we were pretty close, and said they saw no signs of, as gruesome as it sounds, of dead bodies out there at the heliport in that area. But the Pentagon is very clear that there are dead people inside that building. They just don't have any numbers for us. Again, you saw 20-some people went to Arlington Hospital, and others we saw medevaced out of here. At least 2 or 3 critically burned, seriously burned people, possibly critically burned people, burns over most of their body that we saw. There's a team being escorted in here now by Arlington Police, apparently to assist the firefighters here with what they're doing here. We expect that they're going to have a tough time going through the debris here, that some sort of collapse rescue team will probably be called here if they haven't already. But there's still fire in this building, as you saw by the flames that were evident and the black smoke that's coming from the other side. Most of it on the west side by Washington Boulevard. That fire is now extinguished, and most of the smoke is no longer coming out of those windows, and we just can't see what's happening on the courtyard. You heard from Admiral Quigley a little while ago that the National Military Command Center, where Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld is, they have smoke there. Now, we're going to show you some videotape that was shot, I'm guessing, 45 minutes or so after we first arrived. This is when the center portion collapsed. It did not collapse immediately. It appears the jet impact was there. How much of the jet was actually inside the building and how much out, we can't tell you. We never saw any large pieces of the jet on the ground. We saw some small pieces right on Washington Boulevard. But at about 45 minutes, that's when the collapse occurred. We don't know if anybody was hurt when the collapse occurred. We believe that fire personnel were aware of the possibility of the collapse and were far enough away. Again, anybody who was in those offices immediately where the crash occurred, there was a great deal of fire in the beginning. So it's unlikely, unless they got out within seconds, that they got out at all. And that's what we're waiting to hear from Pentagon officials. You've seen the number on the screen. That's for Navy and Marine personnel to report, something that we have not really much seen and have had to give out, certainly since I've been at Channel 9, the 16 years I've been there, to call in to find out what your duties are going to be. We're at the Citgo station, which is the quarters quick mart, which a lot of people have mistakenly gone in to think it's a public gas station. It's really for military personnel only, and it's been turned into a temporary press briefing area for the Pentagon, and Rear Admiral Craig Quigley is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, and he has been forced to give his briefings here because all the press can't get up to the Pentagon. Mike and Andrea?
All right, Dave, we see some trucks with red banding moving in right behind our banner. We've just covered them up. You can see the white tops. That's the Fairfax Urban Rescue, Fairfax Fire Urban and Rescue Team. They were deployed about an hour and a half ago by FEMA, and they are going to be deployed eventually when that building cools down, looking for victims.
They call that a USARS team. You're correct. Yes. Urban Search and Rescue. Fairfax has one of the teams in the country. We've seen them being deployed around the world. We just didn't expect that they would be deployed this close to home, and they were just escorted in by Arlington Police, and we'll go to work to see if they can get inside there at some point when it cools down. It's unlikely with the amount of fire there, and certainly remember what kills people is the smoke, and there was a great deal of smoke from the fire. It's unlikely if anybody was trapped in there that this is going to be a rescue operation. It's most likely going to be a recovery operation.
70 members of this team are being deployed to the Pentagon site.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
All right. The producer just said in my ear, we've got videotape from New York of the planes crashing into the World Trade Center.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't
you know,
make
it's like,
sense. Here
what
it
are
is
you
again.
saying?
This is what happened about 9 o'clock this morning. That was the second plane going into the second tower of the World Trade Center. The first attack happened at 8:45. This happened about 9 o'clock. And about maybe 30 to 40 minutes later, we're going to see the first of the towers crumble into a heap of twisted metal. There again was that plane from another angle hitting the second tower. We're trying to make sense of this. Why on this date, September the 11th? The closest we can get is a U.S. judge had set tomorrow the 12th as the sentencing date for a bin Laden associate for his role in the 1998 bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania that killed 213 people. The sentencing had been set for tomorrow at the federal courthouse in New York near the World Trade Center. That's the closest thing we can get to why maybe today. And about an hour after those towers were hit, a plane struck the Pentagon, the west side.
The United States today was attacked by terrorists. Terrorists hijacked 4 jetliners this morning. One of the jetliners crashed into the Pentagon, 2 into the World Trade Center in New York City. One went down near Pittsburgh. In that crash near Pittsburgh, there was a man who was on a cell phone at the time, and he called 911. He was locked in the restroom. He said, "We are being hijacked. We are being hijacked." That was the passenger aboard United Flight 93. He was trying to call emergency personnel on his cell phone. Westmoreland County Emergency Dispatch Supervisor Glenn Kramer says a dispatcher got a call from a man who said he was locked in a bathroom aboard a plane. The quote about the plane being hijacked came from a transcript of the call. Flight 93 was headed from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. It had 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants on board.
You heard it from former CIA Director Admiral Stansfield Turner and 2 experts on international terrorism. Our lives will never be the same. Everything about aviation, everything we do in this country will change from this day forward.
That plane that we were just telling you about, the one that went down in Somerset County near Pittsburgh, according to Congressman Jim Moran of Northern Virginia, he had a briefing from military leaders. The speculation there is, we may never know for sure, the speculation is, well, you can see on the map, the plane went down in Jennerstown. Apparently,
about 80 miles.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Pittsburgh.
Congressman Moran says after the briefing, apparently that plane was going to try to crash into Camp David.
That's what we had heard earlier. Other mobilizations, we heard from CNN and then heard additional information from Lauren Ashburn at USA Today that 5 Navy warships have left the port of Norfolk, one the USS JFK battle group, the other the USS George Washington, reportedly headed to New York City to protect the East Coast line, and one headed to the Chesapeake Bay.
Once the World Trade Center was hit, we have some videotape of the Brooklyn Bridge being evacuated.
Oh my,
look at that.
People walking.
Oh.
You know, I told you earlier I was concerned about our daughter who's there in college, and I couldn't get through, and they were saying, don't be worried, the circuits would be jammed, and a friend heard and she called, and she's around the South Pier, and she said you could feel the building rumble. Kids who had left earlier for classes came running back. Some were covered with soot, and they were nowhere close to the World Trade Center, but that's just how far it all went. Let's listen to what's going on in New York City right now.
It just somehow had 40 people in there, just an explosion. There's a light flash out my window, my whole doorway to the entrance of my office blew open. My office was freaking out. I just told them to calm down and get to the center of the office. Everybody was fine on my floor, and we just started heading down the stairs. I heard people were trapped in the bathroom. I ran to the bathroom. It was just blown out. I asked if anybody was in there. People weren't in there. So I started going down the steps. I heard people shouting. I stopped at like 68, and there was a woman in a wheelchair, and and I got her in the strap wheelchair and just carried her down the steps and carried her down 68 floors, man. And then we got lost on the 5th floor. It was chaos.
Oh my goodness.
There's going to be, I'm sure, some great stories of heroism. What can you do? Probably the best thing, if you really want to help, is to donate blood.
Donate blood.
Say a prayer.
Donate blood. 1-866 Blood Saves in our area. We've been talking about the exodus from the district. The district is under a state of emergency. Virginia is under a state of emergency. The exodus, how bad is it? How's it affecting traffic? Let's go to Sherry Elliker.
Mike and Andrea, we do have a little bit of good news, if there is such a thing on a day like today. It looks like things have started to clear out around the Beltway. You're looking live at the American Legion Bridge. I can tell you this, that on the inner loop of the Beltway, we're not seeing too many delays right now as you make your trip between Bethesda and College Park. The outer loop of the Beltway is also running nicely across the bridge span until you get to about Springfield, and that's where we're having some problems. We're looking here at Springfield right now. Now, northbound on 95, we're seeing jam traffic from Dale City up to the Beltway. The problem there is that you can go no further than the Beltway because at that point there is a closure in effect. Northbound 395 is closed between the Beltway and the inbound 14th Street Bridge. Southbound 395 is open. So what's happening is people are taking the northbound lanes of 95, they're getting up to the Beltway, and they must get off at the inner loop or the outer loop of the Beltway. So consequently, we're seeing traffic on the outer loop of the Beltway jammed from Springfield over to the Wilson Bridge. Inner loop delays begin about at St. Barnabas Road. But that's about the worst of it on the Beltway. Around town, of course, eastbound Constitution is closed at 23rd Street. Eastbound Pennsylvania Avenue shut down at 18th Street. Inbound Teddy Roosevelt Bridge, that's just been shut down. That's new. And as you know, a lot of the there are a lot of closures around town that are just popping up here and there as security requires that. So we'll keep you posted on all of that. Mike and Andrea, back to you.
All right, Sherry Elliker, thank you very much.
You don't know what to do in a situation like this, but I guess the example of the clergy is the best. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops were having some meetings here in Northeast Washington, and when they heard that Cardinal McCarrick, the Archbishop of Washington, immediately canceled and suspended the meetings, and they went to the shrine and started to pray.
A federal aviation official says all of the commercial aircraft in the United States skies have now reached their destinations. No additional takeoffs will be allowed. There were a number of international flights on their way to the United States to West Coast destinations. The FAA says no troubles reported with those flights. Some flights are landing up in Canada.
Let's go back to Dave Statter at the Pentagon. Dave?
Well, this seems to be the most we've seen the fire under control right now at the Pentagon, where the plane crashed in about an hour after the crash at the World Trade Center. That fourth plane crash you've been talking about up in Pennsylvania, our photographer Greg Geis spent a lot of time up there and has just talked to some people who were at the scene of the crash by telephone. Greg, what can you tell us you've learned about that crash?
Dave, it's about 20 miles from the area where I grew up and was born. And Brad Lawrence from WCCL FM radio, whose transmitter site is near there, tells me that the plane crash site is in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 15 miles northeast of Somerset. And for the Washington viewers, that would be about 25 or 30 miles northeast of the Seven Springs Ski Resort area, near the small town of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The plane, as we understand it, crashed into a reclaimed strip mine, and there are many of them along a mountaintop of the Allegheny Mountains. This would be the main backbone mountain of the Allegheny Mountains, just north and east of Somerset. It's not far for those who travel the Pennsylvania Turnpike and go through the Allegheny Mountain Tunnel. It would be about 7 miles north of the tunnel on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Many viewers are aware of it. Now, the word from the scene is that the plane, a Boeing 767, crashed into the reclaimed strip mine, an open area near the town of Shanksville, near the development called Indian Lake, and it took, they're saying in Somerset County now, about 40 people, 40 people may have lost their lives in that crash.
In the plane or the ground, do you know?
No, it was in the plane. As we understand, there were no ground casualties. It's a very rural, remote area, a reclaimed strip mine area behind what was in the late 60s and early 70s a recreation area called Indian Lake.
All right, that's Greg Geis, photographer from Channel 9, talking to us about the plane crash and information he's been able to get a hold of in Pennsylvania. Still fire here at the Pentagon. We're seeing some smoke coming up. The fire seems to be trapped underneath the roof of the Pentagon, between the ceiling and the roof. And I think even saw a little bit of flame coming through the roof. Yep, we're starting to see some flames come through the roof toward the courtyard side. The plane crash is where the scarring is, all that black sooted area. The plane crash was on that side, and where the gaping hole is, that's where the plane crash occurred. But the fire has traveled into the building, and now coming up through the roof. It's been trapped behind walls, between the ceiling and the roof line, and following pipe chases that run through this building, I'm sure, and electrical conduits. And that's been the difficulty for firefighters, just traveling through this building trying to get a hold of this fire. I mean, certainly not as much smoke and not as much flames as we've seen earlier, so they are making some headway.
All right, Dave, thank you. Again, we're hearing from Admiral Robert J. Natter at the Norfolk Navy base. We have been attacked like we haven't since Pearl Harbor. The ships under his command, he's commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. He has sent Navy ships to New York and to Washington, D.C. areas to assist with air defense and medical needs. He wouldn't disclose details about the deployment, but we have heard from our contacts that the USS JFK Battle Group and the USS George Washington going to New York and heading to the area of the Chesapeake Bay to provide air defense and support with medical needs.
The World Trade Center is gone.
Yeah.
I mean, both towers collapsed after terrorists slammed planes into the buildings.
Okay.
You know, what's scary is we haven't heard any word of casualties from New York, although...
No, we are certain that there may be many.
Yeah.
All right, folks, stop calling on the phone. Give me a break. Today is Tuesday, September 11th. We're trying to find any significance. Wednesday, September 12th, is when the courts were supposed to hand down sentencing for the terrorist responsible for the 1998 bombings in Tanzania. Today, I know, is Tuesday, September 11th. Thank you. Now, let other calls come through to the newsroom, please. Thank you.
Hundreds of people rushed to Manhattan hospitals today to give blood, and officials called in every available surgeon and nurse to deal with the victims of the World Trade Center. The mayor has said, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani has said, the death toll, casualty toll is going to be, in his words, horrendous.
Hospitals in New Jersey and Connecticut are on alert for casualties from New York City. They say you can hear ambulances screaming down major thoroughfares across the city as victims were transported to St. Vincent's Catholic Medical Center in Lower Manhattan. All non-emergency patients have been discharged from the hospital so they can have enough beds to take in the more seriously injured.
We have reaction now from United Nations General Secretary Kofi Annan.
We are all traumatized by this terrible tragedy. We do not yet know how many people have been killed or injured, but inevitably the number will be high. Our first thoughts and prayers must be for them and for their families. I wish to express my profound condolences to them and to the people and government of the United States. There can be no doubt that these attacks are deliberate acts of terrorism, carefully planned and coordinated, and as such, I condemn them utterly. Terrorism must be fought resolutely wherever it appears. In such moments, cool and reasoned judgment are more essential than ever. We do not know yet who is behind these acts or what objective they hope to achieve. What we do know is that no just cause can be advanced by terror.
That was UN Secretary General Kofi Annan speaking about the terrorist attacks today. The United Nations building is one of the buildings in New York that has been evacuated as well.
Do you get the feeling, seriously, that you're going to wake up any minute and say this was the worst nightmare I've ever had? I mean, it's just absolutely unreal, unbelievable. I feel like we're doing a B-grade movie or
As the president said, today we have a national tragedy, but he also said he and the government leaders will do whatever is necessary to protect this country and the citizens of the United States of America. Right now we're going to turn this coverage back to CBS for a little while. Stay with 9 Eyewitness News.
It will take us years to digest. Mr. Jenkins, there's never been a similar occasion, but on other occasions there's been a lot of conclusion jumping, and a lot of the conclusion jumping has been wrong. Now, there is a sort of center of gravity building around the belief that this is the work somehow, some way, of Osama bin Laden and his organization. Give us some perspective on that.
Certainly, the Osama bin Laden organization would have to be included in any short list of suspects, but it is really too early to jump to any conclusions. Keep in mind that it has been less than 6 hours since the first attack. Now, clearly, in terms of the enormity of the attack, the kind of an organization that would be required, the resources that would be required to carry this out, the style of the attack, that is consistent with some of the modus operandi that we've seen come out of the Middle East in the past. But let's wait for the evidence to take us to the conclusion as to who is responsible. Right now we know what has happened. It will take some hours, some days, potentially even some weeks to figure out who did it and exactly why they did it, if they needed a why.
Brian Jenkins in Los Angeles from the RAND Corporation. Scott Pelley is in Lower Manhattan. Scott?
Dan, thank you, Officer. Dan, I've made it down nearly to the base of the World Trade Center. I can see the building here. It is... Dan, it's very difficult to describe. What I see left of one of the World Trade Center towers looks to be about 10 or 15 stories tall. There is black smoke rising over the hulk, the sun behind it. Police officers are moving. The smoke is coming out. There's a building there are two buildings next to the World Trade Center. Both of them are involved in fire. There's fire shooting out of the windows of those two buildings. Large pieces of glass and pieces of these buildings to the street. Dan, the scene here on West Broadway is astonishing. New York City traffic was stopped and incinerated right here in the street. I see a number of New York City police cars that were obviously the first responders to the catastrophe that have been blasted to pieces, thrown over on their sides, and burned. There are a number of U.S. postal vehicles in the street that have literally, Dan, just melted. U.S. postal trucks that have melted in the street. There is a large bus, could be a city bus, might be a kind of a Greyhound bus. Impossible to tell because it has been completely burned away, and is sitting just in the middle of West Broadway. As I reported to you earlier, the street is thick with several inches of muck that is made of construction material and files and paperwork, all sorts of things that were in the World Trade Center building. But, Dan, the site of the building itself, the site of the World Trade Center tower that I can see here is a hulk about 15 stories tall, shattered, broken at the top, with huge columns of smoke rising in front of the sun. Sorry, it's very smoky down here. And the smoke has turned bright orange as it rises over Manhattan because of the backlight from the sun. Dan?
Scott Pelley, live from Lower Manhattan. Now, as part of our CBS News continuing coverage of the events of this day, I want to point out to you that every half hour, on the half hour and on the hour mark, we'll try to give you a summation of late information and what's happened during the day. So, if you're not riveted to the television screen, just know that at or about the half-hour mark and the hour mark, we'll try to bring you up to date. Now, no suburban service in Manhattan. The only train service is leaving the city. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has called what's called an emergency meeting for 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'd be about 25 minutes from now. New York City hospitals now report themselves to be in, quote, desperate need of blood. We mentioned earlier that this was inevitable. It has happened. The American Red Cross is keeping New York City donor stations open. Now, if you're saying to yourself, what can I do? One of the things you can do is arrange to give blood if you're in an area, especially if you're in an area of New York City away from the downtown area where all the emergency work is being done. And let us note that on a national basis, there's a shortage of blood supplies, and when you have a catastrophic event such as this, and it's no good describing it as any other way, when you have a catastrophic event such as this, there are bound to be shortages of blood. So if you want to know something you can do to help in this situation and in general, one would be to give blood. The Pennsylvania Medical Society has been asked to begin collecting names of volunteer doctors to travel to New York City and to the District of Columbia. Remember that the Pentagon was hit. To what extent the damage there, we do not know. What we do know is that there have been some fatalities at the Pentagon. How many? We do not know. There's absolutely no way to know what the casualties are, but mark well, this is a scene of the Pentagon where the smoke still bellows along the flats of the Potomac. The Pentagon in Northern Virginia, of course, just across the Potomac from the District of Columbia itself. But the casualties are expected to be very high from the World Trade Center collapse. Some people are said to be trapped in the debris. They're trying to organize to get those people out.
All right, we're back with our coverage here at 9 Eyewitness News. We want to go to Dave Statter at the Pentagon, where the flames have erupted again on the roof. Dave?
Well, every time it looks like they're starting to make some good headway on this fire, more fire erupts. The fire apparently, and very obviously, trapped underneath the roof here, and the firefighters are having a tough time to getting to it. Right now, it looks like the roof is starting to burn off in the area where this crash occurred, particularly to the left side of the gaping hole that's there. And also there is some fire that we've seen, a little bit of fire to the right side of the hole. So this fire is not yet under control. Firefighters still having problems there. You'll see some flames occasionally erupting. The big question, of course, everybody has here is how many dead people are in there. All we know from the Pentagon is they say, yes, there are dead people in there, which we certainly had assumed all morning long. They still can't give us any numbers of dead and injured.
Okay, Dave, we're going to go up to New York City and the mayor, Rudolph Giuliani.
Very hard to save as many people as possible and to send a message that the city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get. And then, Governor, thank you very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. The first step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now, we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the president, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, well, this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude. We will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
There are large
And
numbers of
I don't think we will know the answer to that until sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Were there large numbers of firefighters?
There are a large number of firefighters and police officers who are in harm's way, and we don't know how many we've lost. But there's no doubt we've lost some firefighters and police officers.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the two buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else?
We believe that it was caused by the after effects of the planes hitting the buildings. We don't know of an additional explosion after that.
Mr. Mayor, could you tell us, do you expect any further attacks on New York? Is there anything to indicate that there could be more bombs, more planes out there? I know originally there was a report that 8 planes had been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by...
We have no specific information to that effect. Obviously, the city is now closed. The airspace around the city is closed. And we are on heightened alert. But we have no specific information suggesting any further attack.
All right, we just lost that signal. We just want to let you know there's been some improvement in the movement for train service out of Union Station. VRE is now saying it has very limited service this afternoon on the Fredericksburg line. They'll run trains out of Union Station at 4 and 6 p.m., but the trains will be slow as the trains will be running at restricted speeds. On the Manassas line, a shuttle train will load up at Alexandria, making all of its stops. It will leave Alexandria at 3, 5, and 7. MARC service, though, out of Union Station remains suspended.
A Navy admiral says the United States has been attacked like we haven't been since Pearl Harbor. Military aircraft are reported to be patrolling the skies above us here in Washington. That's about the only sound you hear. F-16s, military jets, all other air traffic has been grounded. Reagan National will be closed until at least 11
tomorrow morning.
Yeah, most of the airports in the country the same way. Navy ships have been sent to New York and Washington, D.C. to help with air defense and medical needs. An Air National Guard spokesman in Florida says fighters and airborne radar are refueling planes and they have been scrambled. The North American Aerospace Defense Command is also on its highest alert, with all of its fighters, surveillance, and other support aircraft said to be ready to respond.
We reported that one plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, that there was speculation that it may have been targeted to go to Camp David. Well, now authorities have closed Cunningham Falls State Park following the attacks. It's near Catoctin Mountain Park, the home of the presidential retreat at Camp David. Also, Frederick County Election Board will be meeting later today to consider postponing that city's Republican and Democratic primaries. I guess we could say that most activities in the metro area, in and around the metro area, will be canceled for this evening.
We're going to switch now. Many of the wounded from the Pentagon attack, the terrorist attack at the Pentagon, had been taken to the Virginia Hospital Center. We're going to go there for a news briefing.
We probably have the same information as you do right now regarding the scene. What we've been told is that while there's triage tents available and many medical personnel and plenty of EMS transport vehicles available, that there aren't currently any more patients that are immediately available to be transported.
Thank you, Dr. Sabera. I'm sorry.
At any point during the day, did you divert to another hospital? Were you overwhelmed at any point?
We never diverted from to another hospital.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Dr. Sabera is, as we said before, the Assistant Director of the Emergency Department, and he does need to get back inside. Thank you. Once again,
They have about 26 patients we know from Jennifer Ryan's earlier reports that had been transported to Virginia Hospital Center from the Pentagon. And a Pentagon spokesman said there were extensive casualties and an unknown number of fatalities. We just don't know the extent of the injuries. Jennifer said she saw some as minor as walking wounded with sprains, others with severe burns, and others with injuries that required surgery.
The scene downtown, Secret Service agents at the White House shouted at tourists, "Get away, get away." At the U.S. Capitol, stunned congressmen huddled under the shade trees outside the Capitol building. Downtown, students ran to a dorm roof to watched the Pentagon to see what was going on there. Inside the Capitol this afternoon, guards ran through the hallways shouting at people to leave. "There's a plane coming," one frantic guard shouted. "Get out, get out."
In response to the attacks, there are more closings. Again, you'll find these closings as soon as we get them. We're going to put them on the bar at the bottom of the screen. Area malls are closing, Tyson's Corner and Montgomery County malls. Let's go back to Jennifer Ryan. She's at the Virginia Hospital Center.
We are being briefed here at Arlington Hospital by a doctor who is the head of the emergency response team. 30 people so far, 30 people from the Pentagon, all admitted here. We know that 13 have been admitted into the hospital. Of those 13, there are 8 in the intensive care unit, 4 of which are on a ventilator, very, very serious condition, and they have 6 who have been discharged. Behind me, we're talking with Catherine Hughes. She's about to wrap up, but let me tell you quickly what we're hearing at this hour. They are prepared for more people. They do believe that there are more in the field, and they are prepared for more folks who were involved in the Pentagon situation to come to this hospital. Again, we are at Arlington Hospital. Family members are also here at the hospital. We gave you a number earlier in the day. It's a patient hotline number, and what's happening when you call that number is to let you know if one of your loved ones is here, and they will handle you once you get here. Just in case we can show you that number once again, that number is 703-588-6763. Also, we want to let you know that we're still seeing people come through here now. We've got doctors coming in, nurses coming in. It's an amazing situation. We're also hearing that because there are so many people in the field tonight, people who have not been able to get to the hospital, that many doctors are being called in to try to help at area hospitals here in D.C. as well as New York, and also to go out to the field. Here at Arlington, because they're handling so many people, their doctors have volunteered to go into the field, but nobody has been sent out there. They're going to try to handle as many people as they can from this area. The injuries that we are told about, cuts, bruises, a lot of burns, a lot of smoke inhalation, the types of wounds you would see from a bombing, they say, but as far as they know, no biological warfare, nothing of that nature that they've had to deal with today. The other constraint here, of course, is blood throughout the area. New York, D.C., they're having a huge shortage of blood. There is a number, 1-800-GIVE-BLOOD. It's real simple to remember. If you want to help out, that's one of the best ways that you can do it, 1-800-GIVE-BLOOD. Again, the number has been raised now. We have 30 people here at Arlington Hospital, all casualties at the Pentagon. We know of no fatalities, but we have several people in intensive care facing smoke inhalation, fractured bones, burns to their face and hands, and injuries of that nature. That's the very latest from here. I'm Jennifer Ryan. Back to you at Broadcast House.
Jennifer, thank you very much. Let's go back. Yeah, I know. It's can we go back? Let's go through the timeline. Why don't we? Okay. If anybody's just getting in, we have some incredible pictures. I mean, they look like something out of a bad movie.
Remember when we first went on the air this morning about 5 o'clock, and Hillary said this is going to be a perfect 10-day. Well, about 8:45 a.m., the perfection crashed as that plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Shortly after 9 a.m., a second plane crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center.
After that, the next explosion, the next terrorist attack, 9:40 a.m., an aircraft crashes into the Pentagon. Then shortly after 10 a.m., one of the towers of the World Trade Center, which was struck by a plane, a terrorist attack, collapsed.
And approximately at 10, a larger plane crashed in western Pennsylvania. We have had reports that that plane was possibly aimed at Camp David in the Catoctin Mountains. Then around 10:28 a.m., the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsed.
Basically, in a coordinated attack, terrorists took over control of 4 jetliners this morning. An American Airlines plane, a Jet Flight 11 out of Boston, United Flight 175, which was going from Boston to L.A., American Airlines Flight 77.
Which America now says they don't know what happened to that plane.
Yeah, it's suspected that American Airlines Flight 77 is now buried in the Pentagon. It was bound for Los Angeles. It had taken off from Dulles. The other plane was United Flight 93. It was flying from Newark to San Francisco. It crashed near Pittsburgh, you know, the ski resort Seven Springs up in that area. It went down there. Obviously, experts say these were pilots that hijacked these planes because you couldn't get a pilot to go anywhere near these buildings. So obviously the people who took over these planes knew how to fly them. The mayor of New York City says you don't even want to think about the casualty toll, the death toll.
Horrendous loss
out of the
life,
World Trade Center. I can tell you the 2 World Trade Center buildings, a total of 50,000 people work in those offices in the Twin Towers there.
And the tourist trade boosts that number to almost 90,000 every day. We heard from CBS's Scott Pelley, the Twin Towers, about 110 stories tall. He made his way to the base of the World Trade Center. He says the building's maybe about 10 to 15 stories tall.
And we're getting word. This comes from a New York City police official speaking on the condition of anonymity. This police official says thousands could be dead or injured at the World Trade Center.
This was as the first of the World Trade Center towers came crashing to the ground. More closures in our area. Maryland Jockey Club has decided to close both Pimlico Racecourse and Laurel Park for live racing and simulcasting today and tomorrow. Again, pay close attention to the bottom of our screen because there's some area schools that have already decided that they will not reopen tomorrow, mostly private schools, but do pay close attention. We're going to be on the air, Channel 9 and CBS, for the remainder of the night. Obviously, things have changed. CBS has canceled its entertainment lineup for this evening. The Latin Grammys in Los Angeles will not take place tonight. Sunday's Emmy Awards ceremony in Los Angeles has been postponed because of today's apparent terrorist attack, and no new date has been set for the ceremony. They say they want to wait until after what they call the national mourning that's going to take place happens before they even think about rescheduling.
President Bush has ordered a full-scale investigation to, quote, hunt down the folks who committed this act. At Pearl Harbor, 1941, 2,403 military personnel, civilians were killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor. What happened today may turn out to be the deadliest attack on the United States in history.
No one has claimed responsibility, but terrorism experts say it has the signature of the Al-Qaeda terror cell, which is under the direct control of Osama bin Laden. We will continue our coverage here on 9 Eyewitness News at 3 p.m. Right now, we're going to send you back to CBS.
Oklahoma City, many heroic deeds this day, most of those deeds we do not yet know, but police, firemen, ordinary citizens have performed their heroic deeds this day, and while many lives have been lost, many lives have been saved. And it's a day that will, as was the case with Pearl Harbor, live in infamy in American history. We go to John Roberts in Washington. John, perhaps bring people up to date on where the president is and where he isn't at this hour.
Well, Dan, as we try to grasp the enormity of this tragedy, and as many times as you see the pictures, they still hit you afresh, an assault against all your senses. It's just impossible to understand the exact magnitude of all of this. The White House is trying to put the pieces back together here so that they can show that they are in control, to show America that they have a leader who is in command here and a person who is going to lead this country against the scourge of terrorism nationwide. Our what's called in-town travel pool was activated just a little while ago, been taken over to what we'll only describe as a government building in downtown Washington, D.C., for fear that people may be watching this broadcast in order to determine where the leaders of government are for a briefing about what the government does next. As best we can ascertain, Dan, the president most recently was at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he made the address that you played the videotape of just a short while ago, and is now somewhere in transit over the United States, whereabouts and destination classified at this point. We understand that the Vice President is still in Washington, D.C., though the congressional leadership has been ferried separately via separate helicopters to a location outside. But Dan, I think, and this has now been corroborated by two different sources now, there is a move by the White House to try to get the President back to the White House today. Dan, you mentioned a couple of hours ago now, at least, that the President want to get back to the White House today as a show of force against these terrorists. I believe that the administration is of the same mind, and they are in negotiations now with the Secret Service to make sure that they can adequately assure the safety of the President so they can get him back to the White House. Speaking against that, Dan, though, might be this idea that when the President on Air Force One left Barksdale Air Force Base, they trimmed down the number of media personnel, the White House press corps, who was following him from about 14 to 5, which may indicate that they were going to a smaller location, Dan. So still the information somewhat up in the air, all of this again classified because they do not want to reveal where the President or the Vice President.
I'm the Chief of Information. Spelling is P as in Paul, I-E, T as in Tom, R-O, P as in Paul, A-O-L-I. Navy spokesman. And my main purpose here today at this... I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat. My main purpose here today is a single purpose. This is for the local press primarily, here in the Washington, D.C. area. Navy, Marine Corps, active duty or civilian workers that work in the Pentagon, we have established a toll-free line for them to call in and report their status. We need to get an accurate muster, obviously, on who was able to get out of the building unharmed. That was not possible in the immediate aftermath of the blast as people were carried away, moved away from the building. It would be very helpful for us if they can call the 1-877-663-6772. Again, this is not for those seeking information about their loved ones. We understand your concern, but at the moment we are in an information gathering situation where we need to hear from these people, Navy, Marine Corps civilians, active duty that work in the building, work in the Pentagon, who have made it out, who can call this number and report their current status. I'm sorry? The number is 1-877-663-6772. And that is, again, to report your current status if you work in the building, Navy, Marine Corps, civilian, active duty, whatever.
Is it just people who work in this building?
It is for people that work in the Pentagon. That's what we're trying to find out who made it out okay and account for the people that may not have made it out.
But you just want Navy and Marine Corps, not other?
I believe that the other services are establishing similar lines. Clearly, if we get information from someone else who's made it out of the building, we'll try to pass that on to the appropriate services.
Admiral, where were you when the explosion occurred?
I was in the Pentagon in my office, which is in the wedge that was hit.
And can you describe what happened?
Again, we're at the other end of the building. If you understand, if you're familiar with how the Pentagon is constructed, this was on the outside of the building is the E ring. My office is on the B ring on the 4th deck at the end of the 4th corridor. Clearly, it was a loud explosion. Significant concussion blast. I can say that I'm thankful in the new wedge, in the new construction, they replaced the windows with blast-resistant windows. In my office, the windows shook but did not break. None of the many windows on either side of my office broke. Had there been broken glass flying, I'm sure the casualties in my office would have been significant. As it was, no one in my immediate office was injured. The evacuation was prompt, was orderly. I find it, frankly, a testament to the caliber of the people that work in that building that many people could evacuate the building without panic, without discussion, and in a very quick and effective way.
Admiral, can I ask you another question? I was up here, I paused. The thing that struck me was how quickly the military personnel responded, setting up a triage area with stretchers. Obviously, these are colleagues. It's different than in a war setting, somewhere far away. I mean, this is home. It's a testament to them, to me at least, how quickly they responded in the way they did. What about you?
In the same fashion as the evacuation, I think the response, what I've observed personally as I evacuated the building and moved up to regroup, reconstitute with the Navy leadership, was exactly that. Clearly, this is something that every person who was a part of this tragedy will carry with them for the rest of their lives. But it was heartening to see people going about, executing their training, doing what needed to be done in the light of this horrific event. I really am not the proper person to speak on the general information. I wanted to get out primarily to the local media, this 800 number, so that the individuals who work there could get that information to us. Thank you. We don't have that line established yet. When we have better information on...
Good afternoon. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of what's happened, not only in Washington, D.C., but New York City as well. We were just listening to a briefing at the Pentagon, which took a direct hit, a direct terrorist hit early this morning.
It was a commercial aircraft, and I was just over there.
Right.
And I would tell you, you can't see any evidence of an aircraft there. It looks like somebody took a wedge, the kind of wedge you use when you split wood out in your backyard.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody took a wedge and drove it right down through the middle of that building, the Pentagon building.